it raises interesting issues, because what happens if your prime minister is a terrorist? What do we do? What do we do if he's complicit with terrorism and complicit with war crimes and supporting and these plutocrats? I mean, I'm sitting in the Petro-Canada building, filled with men in suits who are actually just as guilty as Bush. These unelected, unaccountable, rapacious corporate crusaders who are hosting Bush across the road. Actually, it's the Chamber of Commerce, the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, who are hosting Bush. And of course, after Bush is swanned off, we're going to hold these people to account, the Canadian people, the world people. We want answers. Is law just for poor people and poor countries, or is it for rich people and rich countries? And as we're seeing through Professor Hall's article, he talked about the double standard, how the ICC is holding up Bashir as an example of, oh look, we're attacking Bashir, whose only crime really, I mean, he like all governments, he's got dirty patches on his record, right? But really his main crime was to discover oil and sell it to China, right? And so and so really, I mean, his crime is really not being white and being a Muslim, and this is the truism, right? And then Bush, a man who's killed much more people than him and the Congolese warlords and all these people put together, can swan into a country hosted by many people. Of course, they're immigrants to Canada themselves, like a lot of the Texan oil merchants who are here looting the land of the Blackfoot people and the Stoney people and the indigenous people whose land they despoil. And we're demanding a change. We want a change. We want law for rich people. We want law for rich countries and poor countries. And we're raising these questions now, and we'll be doing so long after Bush has moved on to his next speaking event.
And of course, that's what the ruling elite fears the most, is ordinary people rising up and saying, we want the rule of law to be just and to be operating for the good of all, rather than having law as just a tool of power in the hands of the elite, as those postmodern professors say it is. Now, speaking of Bashir, it is ridiculous, isn't it, that we have Bush, a man who burned the U.S. Constitution, destroyed a country that in many ways was a flagship of freedom as well as a kind of somewhat nasty empire. He turned it into a completely evil empire without any freedom. Constitution has been officially burned and shredded. It doesn't exist anymore. People can be picked up, assassinated. U.S. citizens even can be disappeared and assassinated and tortured by executive order with absolutely no oversight, no habeas corpus. We're now living in a banana republic dictatorship down here south of the border. Yeah. And but the guy who did it is just waltzing around free. And these people are terrified that we're going to wake up and stand up to this, because I think part of the reason they did 9/11 was that the anti-globalization movement was getting very strong in the late 90s. We had Seattle and similar events where people opposed to this rule of terror and greed by the elite were standing up and doing something about it. And of course, the biggest and most powerful wing of the anti-globalization movement is the Islamic world, the Islamists, because they're saying, you can't come in here and buy up our stuff, you can't lend it interest. We want control of our own oil, and we want to have our own culture and shut you guys out. And that, of course, led to 9/11 as an excuse to crack down on both the anti-globalization movement and its most important, most powerful wing, Islamism. And go ahead.
Indeed. I mean, it's just a smokescreen. It's a way to distract concerned opinion, to beguile and stupefy the working class, so workers do not associate with workers. Namely, say for example in Britain, in my country, racism, the race borders and the race antagonism whipped up by the Murdoch press deliberately, so worker fights worker, as opposed to linking arms, Muslim worker, black worker, Jewish worker, Christian worker, atheist worker, Marxist worker, linking arms and fighting these ruling classes. They want to fragment us, and that's what they did. They knew after the end of the Cold War that there was no way to make the majority of American concerned opinion view an enemy within, which was the communists, right? And so then they needed to create a new enemy within, and of course an external enemy to justify their imperialist crusade. And it is a shame with your constitution. I mean, it was a great moment when the American people rose up, and you had a lot of problems with George III, and we're having a lot of problems with George II, I mean, the main problem is, Karl Marx said this, I'm a great fan of Marxism, and I class myself as a Marxist. Karl Marx said that the ruling class would eventually dig their own graves, and that they would expand and try and find new markets, and eventually the material condition of the working people of the world would reach a stage where they weren't willing to tolerate this exploitation anymore, and a new system would evolve. And that's really what I think is happening. And the 9/11 is crystallization of that truism, that they're trying to hold on as much as they can to the system, which is irrational, exploitative, and most people of the world are fed up with. They want something new. They want a new system. What that will be: libertarianism, anarchism, communism, socialism, or something different, something that embraces religion, something that embraces economic. Because most, these dictators of the world purport to be religious. Bush calls himself a Christian, but religious people believe in the prophets and peace be upon them. Bush believes in the prophets, which spelled with an S, and how to get a piece of them. These people are not religious. These people are economically driven, and they use religion, which preaches love of man. It's like Israel. Where does it say in the Torah to hate your neighbor, Where does it say in any of these religious books to bomb, drop corporate-made bombs on children's heads, on mosques, on religious buildings? It never says that, and that's why we're here to say that we want a new economic order, one that embraces culture, one that embraces religion, and most of all, as stipulated in all religions, to break the loaf of the 5,000, to share and to love each other and to end with this tyranny of the ruling class.
Yeah, hear, hear. Amen to that, brother. along with the insistence on loving relations with your fellow human beings, I think one of the stipulations that religions have brought to bear on social life that perhaps should be revived is the ban on lending at interest. All of the major religions used to have this ban, and it's fallen by the wayside, and perhaps that worked all right when we had a vast fossil fuel endowment to exploit for a couple of centuries and grow the world economy at such an incredible rate that you could just keep on printing, creating money by lending out more and more at interest. With exponentially increasing money supply, as long as you have an exponentially increasing true economy, that works. But now, I think we're going to be seeing the wisdom of the ancient ban on lending at interest as we move to a steady state or even a perhaps slowly declining economy as things level out after this period of rapid growth. So that's something I would ask people to look at, the real reasons why this lending at interest or usury has always been banned by all spiritual traditions.
Yeah, well, it really makes sense. The idea that you can consume something that you don't have, the idea that you can spend something you don't have, really is quite irrational. Actually, I've had a chance to experience the Cuban Revolution, and in Cuba, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they had nothing, and they like Britain when we were fighting fascism in World War II. They had to unite. They had to become self-reliant and autonomous, And in Cuba, they reconciled the automobile, for example, to the pages of history. They said, well, this machine pollutes. It's not rational to sustain this thing. And they've also, they're 85% organic food in Cuba. So the Cuban Revolution is held up by environmentalists. That's just one example of the idea that you can create in the grand economy these derivatives and these fantasy accounting spaces in the economy. We need to get back to good old, the way that humanity survived for thousands of years, which is not consuming too much and not exploiting each other.
Well, it's interesting that the economy in all traditional societies is about 90% plus gift economy. Most goods and services in traditional human economies circulate as gifts. Of course, the modern so-called science of economics knows nothing of this. We have gift economies on birthdays and Christmas in this culture. But that's what we're made for. That's what our genetic endowment tells us to be doing.
Indeed, I mean, when I sit in university, I study sociology, so I'm not too scarred, But when I view these business students, these management students who go through this corporate indoctrination, the Ministry of Capitalist Propaganda, I call it, and they go through it, and it's basically trying to change their human essence, because in our human essence, we love each other, we share, If we see a man in the street, we are innately inclined to help him, I believe. But capitalism, the capitalist system, and especially the mutated version of exchange that we have, wants to counter that. It wants people to look out for themselves. Individualism is the key. I'm sitting surrounded by plutocrats, unelected, unaccountable plutocrats, and they've been telling us, there's no such thing as a free lunch, like Milton Friedman used to say, and lunch